Hello, I'm Sammy. I'm going to walk you through this short presentation on exploring the EYFS. That's the early years foundation stage, and that is the British early years framework from 0 to 5. And the whole point of the EYFS is it provides a developmental framework supporting early years practitioners and settings to understand different developmental milestones for children across a range of different learning areas. So, especially for observing children, having a good understanding of the EYFS and the development matters framework within it, which provides small stepping stones for each age group from birth to 5 across 8 different age phases, provides a solid foundation on which to observe and specifically to analyze the observations that you're doing. So let's crack on. What do we use the EYFS for? Well, first and foremost, for guiding our understanding of what effective early years practice is. The EYFS is based on a series of principles. It has guidance for early years practitioners to follow, as well as the developmental milestones that point to children's development. We also use the EYFS for tracking developmental milestones for each age and aspect of development, and that includes both formative and summative assessment. And just a reminder that formative assessment is assessment that we use as we're going along, that's used to inform our planning, our next steps, and summative assessment is more of a summary of what the children are able to do. And it's more like a line in the sand. On this day, which milestones have been achieved, which have not yet been achieved. That's the difference between formative and summative assessment. And finally, we use the EYFS for supporting our planning, both of the learning spaces in the early years provision, but also of the activities we do. The early years foundation stage is based on the assumption that children are born ready. Children are born ready, able, and eager to learn. They actively reach out to interact with other people and with the world around them. Development is not an automatic process, however. It depends on each unique child having the opportunities to interact in positive relationships and in enabling environments. And as early years practitioners, that's our job to create those enabling environments that support the development to happen. And the early years foundation stage, the document provides a foundation that we can use to guide us on what those opportunities should be, what those positive relationships should look like, and how those enabling environments can be enacted. There are 4 key principles in the EYFS. First is the unique child. Every child is unique. Positive relationships with the practitioners that are working there, with their peers, with parents. Unique child, positive relationships, enabling environments, and those are environments that enable learning, support development, that are well set out, well organized, well thought through, environments that support different areas of learning. And these 3 things, unique child, positive relationships, and enabling environments, support children's learning and development. And that is the 4th principle. So just taking a deeper dive then, a unique child. Every child is unique. Children are constantly learning and can be resilient, capable, confident, and self-assured. So in order to support that, what practitioners can do is understand and observe each child's development, their learning, assess progress, and plan for next steps. And that is really what observation is all about. Observation supports us to do those things. Practitioners can also support babies and children to develop a positive sense of their own identity and their own culture. Practitioners will identify any needs for additional support. If through your observations and your knowledge and understanding of each child, you start to see atypical development or red flags, then this is where you start to explore the need for additional support. Practitioners can keep children safe and definitely value and respect all children and families equally. That's the first principle of the EYFS. Positive relationships, as we've already said, is the second. Children learn to be strong and independent through those positive relationships. And here we see the EYFS has defined what positive relationships are. And the EYFS says positive relationships are warm and loving and foster a sense of belonging. Positive relationships are sensitive and responsive to children's needs, feelings, and interests. Positive relations are supportive of children's own efforts and independence. They're also consistent in setting clear boundaries for children. Positive relationships are stimulating, and they're built on key person relationships in early years settings. And that's very much about the second principle. Let's move on and have a look at the third, enabling environments. Children learn and develop well in enabling environments in which their experiences respond to their individual needs, and there is a strong partnership between the practitioners that work in the daycare provision, but also their parents and primary carers at home. And those three, what the EYFS says enabling environments are environments that value all people, value learning, and these enabling environments offer stimulating resources, toys, equipment, games, art resources, etc., relevant to the children's cultures and communities, rich learning opportunities through play and also playful teaching. And enabling environments provide support for children to take risks and to explore. And those three elements together contribute to the fourth principle, which is learning and development. Children develop and learn in different ways. The EYFS framework covers the education and care of all children in early years, including those with special needs or disabilities. Learning and development will foster the characteristics of effective learning, and that is achieved in the early years through playing and exploring, active learning, and creating and thinking critically. So those are the principles on which the early years foundation stage is based. And of course, here we come to the OAP cycle: observation, assessment, and planning. You start with your observation, watching children, looking, listening, noting, describing what they do, selecting the right kind of observations to gather the information that will inform the next stage, which is the assessment. Here in this stage, you analyze your observations, you decide what they tell us about children, what they tell us about their interests, about their development, which milestones they've met, which milestones are emerging, and you use that to feed into your planning. What's next? What experiences, opportunities can I plan for next, either for the individual child or small groups or for a class? You think in terms of your planning of how can I structure the learning environment, the resources, how can I lay out the room, what continuous provision can I provide as part of my setups, and also what resources, routines can we provide for children based on the observation, followed through with the assessment and linked into planning. And finally, Planning will also consider what the practitioner's role is. You will plan how you can support children and what you can do. We've already talked about the difference between formative and summative assessment, but a reminder that formative assessment has these elements. You observe children as they act and interact in their play, in their everyday activities and planned activities, and you learn from children's parents what the children do at home. This is observation, and this is something that's dynamic and happening all the time. As part of your formative assessment, do consider the examples of development within the EYFS under the columns headed Unique Child. These, ladies and gentlemen, are your stepping stones or your developmental milestones by which you can measure children's development. Use those developmental milestones under the Unique Child heading to observe what children can do and help identify where they may be in their own developmental pathway. Consider ways to support children to strengthen and deepen their current learning and development. And within the framework, you have the first column, which is Unique Child, and that lays out your developmental milestones. But for each age, for each developmental milestone, in the next column, you have positive relationships. And in that column, there are suggestions of what the practitioner, what you as the early years practitioner can do to support the children in achieving those developmental milestones. And finally, the third column of that document, which we will look at in a few minutes, is called Enabling Environments. And that's how you can set up the rooms, organize the nursery and the early years provision to support the children in meeting those developmental milestones. Let's look at summative assessment. This is identifying when the milestones have been met. Remember, I said before, summative assessment is a summary of achievement. Use milestones in meetings with parents to discuss children's progress, and do maintain a developmental file for every child. Pardon me. The EYFS also highlights characteristics of effective learning, as we said earlier. Playing and exploring, this is about engagement. Finding out and exploring, playing with what they know and being willing to have a go. Active learning, this is about motivation, being involved, concentrating, keeping trying, enjoying, achieving what they set out to do, and creating and thinking critically. This is about their thinking skills, having their own ideas, making links, and choosing ways to do things. Okay, so that's the foundation of the EYFS. They're the foundations, the principles that the EYFS is built on. Let's now move in to look more at the nuts and bolts. So we'll start off by identifying that there are 7 areas of learning in the EYFS. And those 7 areas are subdivided to primary areas, that's 3 areas, and specific areas of learning. So let's look at those. The prime areas are fundamental. They work together and move through to support development in all the other areas as well. And these prime areas we're really focused on from birth. So 3 prime areas of learning are personal, social, and emotional development, communication and language, and physical development. And let's take a look at the 4 specific areas that form the rest of the 7 areas of learning. These include essential skills and knowledge for children to participate fully in society. And these 4 specific areas are literacy, mathematics, knowledge and understanding of the world, and expressive arts and design. And here you see a wheel with the child in the middle as the unique child, and you see those 7 areas of learning around the cycle. The yellow parts of that cycle show you the primary areas of learning, and it shows you how they are supported into the more specific areas of learning. Okay? Now let's see how those areas of learning are divided down into aspects. Each area of learning is divided down or subdivided into aspects, and the aspects are a more specific element of that curriculum area. So if we look here, we have, and there's 17 aspects, by the way. So if we look here at the prime areas of learning, let's take, for example, personal, social, and emotional development, which is up there. It's the first area of learning. That is subdivided into 3 aspects: making relationships, self-confidence and self-awareness, and managing feelings and behavior. Physical development is subdivided into moving and handling, and health and self-care. Communication and language is subdivided into 3, and the aspects that relate to the communication and language are listening and attention, understanding, and speaking. And so you can see on the slide the remaining aspects that link to the remaining specific areas. As I said, there are 17 aspects which come from the 7 areas of learning, and each of those 17 aspects are broken down into developmental milestones for each age group. For each aspect, for each age group, the EYFS guidance shows how we can support the child to achieve the milestones through our practice and how we organise the environment, exactly as I was talking about just a few moments ago. The EYFS is split into 8 age groups, and each age group overlaps. So the first is birth to 11 months. The second age group is 8 to 20 months, then 16 to 26 months, 22 months to 36 months. And this is how the EYFS is structured when we look at how the developmental milestones are organised. And we're going to go now onto the next slide, and we're going to have a look at the first aspect. So as you see across the top, it's written personal, social, and emotional development. That's the area of learning. And the first aspect is making relationships. And then you have those 3 columns that we talked about. Unique child, that's where we have the developmental milestones. So all of those bullet points in that column, that shows the children's developmental milestones and what they should be achieving in line with their age. And then the rows support us with the ages. So the first is birth to 11 months, 8 to 20 months, and so on down the left-hand side. The second column is the positive relationships column, and that's what the adults can do to support the children achieving the milestones that are listed in the first box. And the final column there is enabling environments, and that's how we set up and plan the environment to meet those milestones listed there in the first column. So here we go. That's where your developmental milestones are listed, and when you're carrying out child observations, it's these milestones that you should be looking at. So you carry out your observation, and then as part of your analysis for the observation, when you're making sense of it or evaluating it, you can look at these milestones here that I've circled For the aspect that's relevant, so you look through the 17 aspects, you identify which is the relevant aspect or aspects for the observation that you've just carried out. You look at the child's age, and then you look at the milestones that are associated to that aspect and that age, and then you can identify which, if any of them, were met during your observation. And here we continue with the first aspect of the first learning area. We're still on making relationships, and you see here we have the other 3 age groups listed here. And once again, those are the milestones that are related to those age groups in the making relationships aspect of development. So let's just take a closer look at some of those milestones. So here we have the birth to 11 months milestones. This is still for personal social development area of learning, and it's still for the making relationships aspect. And here are the milestones that are listed. So between birth and 11 months, in terms of making relationships, these are the milestones here that I've listed on screen that the children should achieve between birth and 11 months. And obviously, if they're not achieving them after 11 months, that's when the red flags start to go up. So let's just choose a few examples from these milestones. Enjoys the company of others and seeks contact with others from birth. Recognizes and is most responsive to their main carer's voice, face. Their face brightens and activity increases when familiar carers appear. So these are the milestones that when we're observing children, we should be looking out for in terms of their relationships. And the final slide, we're just going to jump ahead and we're going to stick with the same aspect, same area of learning, but we're going to jump ahead to a child that's 30 to 50 months. And you can see here that there's 4 milestones that they should be achieving within this age phase. And here are the examples. Can play in a group, extending and elaborating play ideas. For example, they could build up a role play activity with other children. They may initiate play, offering cues to peers, play cues to peers to join in with them. So there's 2 examples out of the 4 listed here on the screen of what we would expect to see from a child between age 30 and 50 months. Now, in order to be successful at carrying out observations, it is essential that you are familiar with the EYFS document, that you have it printed out, and that you refer to it while you're doing observations, while you're doing the analysis part of the observation. So obviously your first part of the observation is to observe and record what you see and what you hear without analysis. And when you're finished, then you start to look at these milestones, you link the milestones, you would note in your evaluation which milestones the children are that you've been observing are secure in, which are emerging, and you can use these milestones to support you in identifying next steps for the children. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.